So this is Karl Moore talking management for the Globe and Mail. Today I'm speaking to a four-star general in the U.S. Army, General Dempsey. Do you see there's differences between when you were a young leader and what was required then and what is required among young leaders today? Has it changed in the last 30 or so years since you started out, the nature of what leadership is?
The essence of leadership and the way you interact, the way the leader interacts with the led has remained fairly constant, it seems to me. But the complexity in which the leader must operate, the world was very simple, as you know, before 1990, relatively simple, especially for a military leader. I am in awe of what some of these young leaders do on the streets of Baghdad or on the streets of Kabul in terms of dealing with complex problems and their ability to frame a problem and understand it is quite remarkable. And in fact, one of the big questions we've got for ourselves as an Army is how do we take these young leaders who have been dealing with complexity at the tactical level, the lower levels, and then educate them through the course of their career to be able to deal with those same kind of complexities as senior leaders. So the answer is the environment has become so much more complex, and that's the big difference I see in the challenge we've got in developing our leaders, to deal with that complexity and uncertainty in a way that I didn't have to until I probably became a colonel.
It's interesting. In the business school, we might talk about leadership and management as being two different ideas. Do you see a need for management within the military as well as for leadership?
You know, that's a distinction that won't surprise you to know we've wrestled with for some time ourselves. And for my personal way of thinking about it, a good leader has both the attributes you would describe as leadership attributes, but also increasingly as you gain seniority, it just is inherently a set of management skills you must have to be a leader. So I mentioned that some of the way we develop our young brigadier generals, for example, we send them to business school, which may or may not surprise you, because they've got certain leadership skills that have been developed over time in them. But what they lack is some of the management skills to be good leaders. So I don't know whether I've further confused the issue, but clearly the attributes that make a good leader over time must include management skills.
So you wouldn't want a leader who can't manage, particularly at a senior level.
That's right.
Nor would you want a manager who doesn't have any leadership at all, because that would be dispiriting.
That's correct.
It's interesting. So you use the idea of team. When I think of military, and this may be outdated, I think of hierarchy, of saluting, of a set of officers above me. But you see it more as the reality is it's a team effort. Does leadership move around the table in the course of a week's work within a military unit?
Yes, it does actually, and I think that is something we're trying to understand about the. I mentioned this. We call it the operating environment. The change in the nature of the security challenges in this century, for any number of reasons that we could talk, whether it's demographic shifts or globalization, climate change, information technologies, the environment is changing. And as the environment changes, it occurs to us that the threats we face will be much more complex, much more hybrid, that is to say multifaceted, including syndicates of irregulars, nation states, and criminals in some cases, with globalized logistics networks. I mean, think opium emanating out of Afghanistan, or think Al-Qaeda as a network. And as a result of that, the notion is that to defeat a network, and we think of the threats we face, there are some nation-state threats to be sure, but we think of the more likely threats we'll encounter to be networked. And we have a phrase that to defeat a network, you have to be a network. You can't. It's almost I don't know if you've read The Starfish and Spider by Ori Brafman. He talks about network decentralized organizations and how hierarchical organizations have a very difficult time encountering them. And this is a business book. Think Napster and the record industry. And so, or in our case, think Al-Qaeda and the United States military. So I think where we're heading is to more, let's call it more trust than control. And we have been the quintessential hierarchical organization. And in that capacity, leadership will move around the table. Now, we'll always have our rank structure, we'll always have our disciplines, but I think that you will see us evolve into an organization where trust is as much the coin of the realm as control is.
So we see the decline of hierarchy, but not the death of hierarchy. But you see hierarchy has declined significantly within the military.
I think the way you phrased it is exactly the way I would have phrased it had you asked me it in the form of a question. We have the hierarchical part of the Army is that which functions and aligns itself to our budget cycle, and that will never change. I mean, there's a very deliberate process where we take concepts and turn it into requirements and turn them into resources. And that has to happen in a hierarchical fashion so that the government can continue to function. And we have to nest into that process. So at the Department of the Army level in particular, there will always be a hierarchical structure that essentially allows us to compete for resources based on concepts and requirements. But below that, I think absolutely we are seeing that there's real potential in decentralizing.
We see kind of the outside view is that the military is very rational, very unemotional, just the facts. But what is the role of emotion in terms of leading people in the military? How important is emotions?
They're vitally important, actually, and especially in an army that is at war and is paying the price for promoting the nation's interest in terms of blood and treasure. And so the emotions run high, actually. You know, I forget, I was reading one book, it might have been The Strategy Paradox or one of those, and there was a phrase in there that said, there is no thinking without emotion. And I find that to be very true. I mean, the arguments we have with each other, and I use the term arguments not pejoratively, but the arguments we have internally about how to provide the best Army possible given available resources and demands are often emotional arguments, but emotion in a positive sense. Yes, you know, I mean, of course there's times when the emotion is corrosive, but fundamentally I'd suggest to you that an army at war ought to be emotional.
How do you maintain hope in tough times that you faced at times during your time in Iraq? It looked bleak at times, it was difficult, lots of losses. How do you maintain hope in a tough environment like that, a time of great change?
Constantly reinforcing the task and purpose. Soldiers will do anything. I mean, it's just mind-boggling the degree to which they will seek to accomplish a mission if they understand it, and especially now. Remember, I said what's different about the young men and women today. I mean, their desire to understand things because they've had access, almost complete access to information. You know, these are the same kids that can look you dead in the eye and send a text message without you even knowing it, unless you happen to glance down and see that they're doing it. So they are connected in a way that certainly you and I were not. But as a result of that, they have this intense desire to understand, and I also believe to contribute. So, you know, there was a time in our Army just 10 years ago when we fought that. You know, something bad would happen in the unit or something good, or mostly something bad, and the idea would be, let's shut down the access to the network. You know, let's shut down the internet cafe so that the bad news can't spread. Well, that's absurd. I mean, the ability to connect, their ability to connect, far exceeds our ability to prevent them from connecting. And so what we've decided is that rather than fight that, we should actually leverage it, and so we do. I mentioned, you know, we have 57-year-old four-star generals blogging. I never thought I'd see the day. But we're communicating with our soldiers in ways that I think maintain that sense of purpose, allow them to see what we're trying to do, even in some cases take their advice. But I think it's the power of their knowledge. What inspires them is their access to the knowledge, and so we've just got to continue to find ways to do that.